European leaders are demanding Donald Trump tell Vladimir Putin that Ukraine's interests must be defended and Europe's security mustn't be compromised when the pair meet later this week for that very important, highly anticipated peace summit, Kosha. How much is the EU bloc's cooperation, as well as the UK's actually, crucial to safeguarding American interests in Ukraine? Does there need to be a level of give and take somewhere here?
This one is interesting because there is the Russia-Ukraine agreement, and that's kind of the core of this meeting. But there is so much more to it as well. The fact that it's happening in Alaska, which has historical significance both for Russia and the US. They might be discussing shipping lanes and energy and an off-ramp for Russia away from this escalatory situation. So there's a lot that I think Trump and the Trump administration is working on that includes but extends beyond the Ukraine conflict. So when you look at it through that context, the Europeans kind of get boxed out a little bit. I think there are, I'm sure, calls taking place behind the scenes. President Trump understands what they want, what their position is, but he is America first. And insofar as Europe's interests fit in his America first framework, great. When they diverge, he will be America first. And if that means Europe having to swallow some medicine that maybe they weren't expecting or won't like to swallow, they are probably going to have to.
They're probably going to have to. Well, yeah, look, I think all eyes will be on that meeting. It's D-Day. It's D-Day for both Russia and Ukraine. So let's see what happens. I want to move on to Palestine now. My colleague James Morrow has pointed out in the Daily Telegraph today that Anthony Albanese's decision to recognise a Palestinian state is more evidence that Labor is tilting Australia's foreign policy towards the EU and away from the US, even as our need for a strong American alliance is greatest. Kosha, do you think this is the case? I mean, Albo can't even get a meeting with Donald Trump at the moment, but do you think that this is indeed part of a bigger policy shift?
It seems like it. It's now 140 countries or so that have either signed on to this two-state solution or indicating that they will. The US is more and more out there, kind of on a limb by themselves, obviously the strongest ally over here, where the current administration does not support that. They kind of dismiss this thing as highly symbolic in nature, which is true. It's more just a statement, but symbolism does have value. Things can be undone with future administrations. The US has evolved its position on this. Under Clinton, Bush years, Obama, Biden, they were more favorable to the two-state solution. So this is really the Trump administration has veered away from that and thinks it's prohibitive to getting some kind of peace, given the current context over there. But it is interesting. I think the big picture is showing that the mood of the world and many countries is shifting more into that realm, whether we like it or not, that is happening. And so Prime Minister Albanese is taking stock of that whole dynamic, doing what he thinks he's going to do. There might be consequences to it because he is breaking from the US, strongest ally, and we shall see where the story ends.
I mean, this is all happening at the UN General Assembly next month, but doesn't America have the right to veto? Doesn't it have veto powers? So realistically, it's probably going to veto it anyway.
Right. So this is all symbolic, hence his Secretary Rubio's point that this is all symbolic, and you can sort of, I think he called it a publicity stunt, that you can put statements out there, but it doesn't really mean anything other than people signaling that the mood of the electorates in these countries probably are pushing them towards something that was not the policy historically, and that, we have to take that for what it is.
Yeah, so it's a symbolic gesture, but it means so much more deep down, and it's not great for the Jewish community here either. Look, let's move on. A pro-Palestinian group has vowed to take its fight to shut down Brisbane's Story Bridge for a mass protest to court if needed after police flagged security and safety concerns. Justice for Palestine has also begun preparations for the major rally, despite not yet getting the green light. Kosha, we saw this weeks ago here in Sydney. The protesters didn't get the green light. They took it to court. They won at the 11th hour, hijacked the Harbour Bridge. The terror flags were being waved. It was an embarrassment. The pictures went worldwide. Are these protesters now more and more emboldened? Because we saw the steps of the Sydney Opera House, the Harbour Bridge, now the Story Bridge in Brisbane. It's a weekly thing now.
They are. I think the precedent of Sydney and what the High Court there did is obviously something that they are looking at, and they're, I'm sure, going to do the same thing in Queensland, and we'll see. Each court is different. But it's striking to the heart of taking advantage of the laws in free countries like Australia that do protect the right to peaceful assembly, but they're using it for a cause that not everybody is sympathetic to. There are people who are sympathetic to it, but when you block traffic and take over iconic landmarks for something, they're not exactly the most sympathetic figures, even if people have sympathy for the humanitarian crisis and things like that over there. So it is interesting. I think it's an example of multiculturalism you import a lot of people with different allegiances and values into the country, and then you've got sort of these laws that protect protests, peaceful protests, as they should. Those are good laws to have. You are going to see them use that to their advantage, and the Sydney precedent, I think, just is a blueprint. So I do think we're going to see it more and more everywhere.
Yeah, which is a shame. And again, it's a terrible precedent, and just the Australian Jewish community right now are just tearing their hair out. Now, look, this is interesting. CNN is reporting that Google searches for Epstein are down 89% from just 3 weeks ago. Have a look at this.
I would say that this is, from at least a political point of view, quickly turning into a dud of a story. What am I talking about here?
Which is wild.
Which is wild.
This has been for 3 weeks now.
Exactly. Take a look here. Google searches for Epstein down 89% versus just 3 weeks ago, falling through the floor.
Oh, a dud of a story now, Kosha. They're saying that CNN are shocked. They can barely contain their shock right now. But what do you put it down to?
They say a week is a lifetime in politics, and maybe we're seeing that. There's so much coming out of this administration. They call it the flood the zone strategy, just news and everything we just talked about right now in this segment, and then 100 things on top of that. So there's just so much going on that when you're trying to save the world and the world is on fire, so to speak, a story does eventually diminish. It is interesting, though, because the Epstein story is about so much more than just Epstein, the character. It really goes down to transparency and the government, the perception that the government covers things up or protects powerful people and all of that. That, I think, remains a very potent strain in the electorate. A lot of people are very angry about that in all sorts of contexts, from the way COVID was handled to all sorts of other things, and this kind of symbolizes that. But I think the story itself, we have bigger fish to fry, is what this poll is saying, and it is interesting that the Google search results are down 89%. That surprised me.
It's incredible. Well, you know what? It comes in swings and roundabouts, the news. So we'll see. I'm sure at some point it'll re-emerge in that news cycle. Kosha Gada, lovely to see you. Thanks so much for joining me on the show this evening. Really appreciate it.